The indices leading to these rather negative deductions are to be found on almost every aspect of Nigerian social, economic, and political landscape. These include a pervading insecurity, a comatose economy, the lack of a visible leader as the captain of the ship of our nation, as well as the myriad of centrifugal forces threatening the peace, stability, and unity of the country. We, as patriotic and concerned citizens, are all stakeholders in the Nigerian project and therefore cannot afford to sit idle by while a few people who we otherwise regard as our leaders, in whose hands we have committed our security, safety, happiness, and our future, either through sheer incompetence, acts of omission or commission, steer our ship into even greater peril. While sounding this note of caution, I wish to make myself very clear that I am an incurable optimist, not in any way an alarmist or worse still, a prophet of doom. Rather, as a trained engineer and a politician who is engaged in the pragmatic science of managing human beings, I'm given to perceiving and analyzing human circumstances on the basis of empirical and palpable facts, devoid of sentiments. At the threshold of 2021, we need to pray as patriotic citizens that the ship of the Nigerian nation, now wobbling so violently and sailing rudderlessly towards turbulent waters, does not run aground. The beacons to these rather frightening deductions are clearly visible in the state of the nation's economy and security. The economy. The performance level of the economy is universally the best parameter to gauge the health of a nation. This is because the economy is the bedrock of human society. Very sadly, without any equivocations, the Nigerian economy, all through the year 2020, was on a free fall, resulting in 2 recessions within a short space of time. Those in authority and their propagandists are often so quick to give the omnibus excuse that the raging coronavirus pandemic has affected the economies of nations and that Nigeria cannot be an exception. Admittedly, the COVID-19 epidemic has devastated in varying degrees the economies of countries for the past 1 year. However, the parallel state of the Nigerian economy today cannot be exclusively attributed to the consequences of the pandemic. Rather, the economy of Nigeria is experiencing and suffering from the consequences of the failure to diversify from total reliance on crude oil exports as a means of earning foreign exchange. Contrary to the campaign hypes made by the APC in 2015 and 2019, the country's major industries have remained comatose and irreversibly dead in some cases. The recent delicensing of over 40 microfinance banks by the CBN for non-performance is the latest indication that the nation's economy is in a dreadful condition. If the nation's collapsed textile industries had been brought back to life, as promised by Buhari in his electioneering campaigns, that sector would have been providing hundreds of thousands of employment outlets, as well as saving the over $4 billion Nigeria has been losing annually in the importation of textile products. If the present administration had accomplished that singular feat, the economy would have at least experienced an appreciable level of breather. Similarly, so much benefits could have accrued in terms of employment opportunities and saving on the nation's foreign exchange through a well-planned and focused programs on agriculture and agro-allied industries. In other words, if we were a serious people with the fortunes of visionary leadership, Nigeria should have no reason to remain reliant on import of food in spite of all the natural resources, human capital, conducive climate conditions, and abundant arable land. Alas, in spite of the promise severally made in the past 5 years, nothing appreciable has been achieved in our quest to attain sufficiency and security. That's food sufficiency and security. Perhaps in no other sector of the economy has the APC-led federal government performed below par than in the oil and gas sector. Categorically, the government has exhibited inconsistency and policy somersault in this regard. In one breath, the government has proclaimed deregulation as a policy, but on the other hand, what has been playing out in 2020 is a half-hearted and outright lack of the willpower to drive a policy option which enlightened minds have long advocated as the way forward. By this, it is meant that if the government has chosen deregulation, it should come out clean instead of the present scenario of prevaricating. The enlightened opinion is that regulation in the oil sector should imply complete total disengagement of government in the business of the downstream sector. With the regulation, the nation's 4 refineries should be privatized to enhance transparency and market-driven operations in the petroleum refining industry. It is, of course, a difficult and a bitter pill that, for political expediencies, the government might be too enthusiastic to apply, but like a surgery that is required to remove a cancerous tumor, deregulation is ultimately the one painful decision that must be taken now. In the same vein, it is time that the lingering controversies and impediments around the petroleum industry bill, that's the PIB, before the National Assembly, be resolved and put to rest. We are of the conviction that the bill, when enacted, will further open up efficiency, transparency, accountability, and probity, because it is expected that the oil industry will be freed from the stronghold of those that have been taking undue and self-centered advantages of the present leakages in the sector. It will further open up development and infusion of local content and indigenous technological know-how in oil prospecting, exploration, refining, and related technology. It will also attract a lot of direct foreign investments into the sector, which is badly needed to increase our reserve from the 35 billion barrels of crude oil that we have today to over 40 billion barrels of crude oil and gas. Deregulation in the downstream sector under the PIB will very importantly further lead to the inflow of huge direct foreign investments. However, it is instructive and necessary that the PIB should be scrutinized to remove the apparent shortcomings and other encumbrances to avoid failure in actualizing the intended noble objectives. For instance, as presently packaged, the bill appears to have been crafted to make the sector to be more opaque by giving the regulatory agencies in the sector an overriding control to the exclusion of other government agencies and institutions that are constitutionally mandated to oversee the operations of the sector. The emphasis here is that the new bill should restrict the regulatory agencies to their responsibility of licensing and production and not engaged in the nitty-gritty of export, whose powers are vested in other agencies of the government. To do otherwise, the PIB would have resulted in the creation of an overbearing and monstrous enclave of monumental corruption, sleaze, and cloudy practices by officials in league with the cabals that surrounded the industry. On a positive note, the ADP wishes to commend the federal government for sanitizing the unbundling through the unbundling of the industry of multiplicity of the agencies that observers and strategic key players have long advocated their abrogation. As it is, a number of these agencies were performing overlapping functions, with some of them outrightly idle and irrelevant. What President Buhari and the legislature must do in the petroleum industry is for them to muster the required political will to take the bull by the horns in the face of the available options. At this point, the ADB wishes to give credit to Buhari's administration for initiating the conclusion of the Ajaokuta-Kaduna-Kano gas pipeline project, which, when completed, will tremendously impact on the nation's economy through affording manufacturers and industries along the corridors of the pipeline cheap and easy access to critical source of energy. However, the ADP wishes to admonish Mr. President that this is one project he must see to its execution because at the end of the day, the proposed gas pipeline might well turn out to be his most outstanding and enduring legacy. In a similar vein, the ADP joins the teeming Nigerians of goodwill in applauding the long overdue reopening of 4 of the nation's borders, illogically and insensitively closed for more than 1 year. While it lasted, the border closure was at best counterproductive without any tangible positive effects on the economy of the country in any meaningful ways. If anything, the ill-thought-out decision only succeeded in exacerbating penury among Nigerians as it engendered hyperinflation, scarcity, and crippling of medium and small-scale entrepreneurship. With the opening of the borders, however, the government must be more alive to its statutory responsibilities of checking the inflow of leather contraband such as dangerous drugs, small arms, and light weapons presently being used by criminals and non-state actors in the ruination of our productive segments of the population, as well as in the destabilization of the peace, security, and the stability of the country. Fiscal policies. Budget 2021 from 2015, when the annual budget estimates hit the unprecedented mark of 4.15 trillion naira, through to the 2021 budget of 13.58 trillion naira, Nigerians have been hearing year in, year out budgetary allocations in huge sums, but which have not correlated to positive impacts in their welfare. The explanations for this paradox are not far-fetched. All the fiscal policies of the present administration, as contained in the sectoral allocations in its budget from 2015 to date, have been heavily tilted towards recurrent expenditures, which means expenditures on the personnel that only go to further service the bloated, profligate lifestyles of the politicians and their allies in the public service. In the preceding few years, due to the uncontrolled penchant for domestic and external borrowings by the government, a good chunk of the nation's revenue, up to 99% in some cases, has been going into debt servicing. For instance, the proposed revenue and expenditure budget of 2021 at 13.58 trillion naira has about 7.8 trillion naira as projected revenue, thereby leaving the country with an estimated 5.02 trillion naira deficit. This is more than 3% of the GDP, which is above the threshold set by the fiscal policy. To make for the shortfall, the government intends to finance the deficit through new borrowings, totaling to about 4.28 trillion naira. The government also plans to realize about 205.15 billion from privatization of the public assets, as well as 709 billion naira from drawdowns on multinational and bilateral loans. What this translates to mean in concrete terms is that, in addition to the already heavy external loans of Nigeria, presently put at over 31 trillion naira, the country is going into the new year to obtain even more external loans that inevitably lead our nation deeper into the vicious web of financial bondage, gradual erosion of the nation's sovereignty, and future prospects of generations unborn. Another obvious import of the 2021 budget is that the citizens will be further subjected to a more strangulating regime of taxation, which will in turn imply more excruciating poverty. The government has not come out to declare its plans for a new flurry of taxation as a policy option in 2021. However, the body language of the various financial institutions that superintend fiscal policies and revenue generations have clearly indicated that overbearing and the expanded scope in taxation should be expected from the government. And come to think of it, this is against the background of the havoc being wreaked on the economy by the global COVID-19 pandemic, and which have added negatively to the economic deprivations of the majority of Nigerians. CBN and multiplicity of exchange rates. The present fiscal policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria on the foreign exchange, the present monetary policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria on the foreign exchange rate is long overdue for a realistic review that comes to terms with the facts of the nation's economy. The potential and craving to launch the country on the path of recovery and positive transformation can only be achieved if the central bank divorced itself of the political inclination of maintaining multiple rates of foreign exchange instead of adopting single window as against the present policy. By discarding the present regime of multiple window exchange rates, which is politically correct and expedient, Nigeria will be moving away from subsidizing the naira, giving it a false value, while at the same time perpetually undermining the potential to launch the country to the path of becoming a productive economy. The present regime of operating multiple exchange rates, which is another name for subsidizing the naira, is no more than an arrangement that promotes artificiality and imbalance, the wasting of billions without stimulating production and encouraging sharp practices. The ADP is of the informed opinion that the billions spent to support the corrupt lifestyle of the present beneficiaries of naira, of the present exchange rate, would have been best used to stimulate domestic production. Security. The year 2020 was of the unprecedented escalation in the recurrent challenges of insecurity. Beside the Hydra-headed Islamists, otherwise known as Boko Haram, in the northeast region, the Northwest in 2020 also became a vast theater of mayhem, bloodletting, and socio-economic devastation through the phenomenon of armed banditry, kidnapping for ransom, cattle rustling, and several other forms of heinous crimes and criminality. In the North Central region, insecurity has manifested in intercommunal and wars, clashes with herdsmen and farmers, and as well as clashes between people of different faiths. The Southeast, South-South, and the Southwest, in varying degrees, also witnessed frightful security nightmares that threaten safety of citizens' lives, property, unity, and stability of the country. Unfortunately for the country, the security agencies have appeared overwhelmed and helpless, just as the political leadership in the country, the APC-led federal government, has shown gross lack of capacity and breathtaking nonchalance. Those that should be providing leadership and circle at such perilous moments in the life of the nation do not seem capable of comprehending the prevailing situation on the horizon. Where they make pretense of living up to their responsibilities, it has always become as either misplaced, belated, or completely off track. It is appalling as it is amazing and very worrisome that recently some bandits went on an audacious rampage in Kankara, Katsina State, at a time the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces was in the state. The disturbing aspect of that incident is that if the entire security apparatus of the country, for whatever reasons, failed to secure the environment where the President where the President of the country was at the time, who can then be secured in any part of the country? It was a scandalous incident, a strong indictment of our military, and a huge embarrassment to the country and the international community. Is it not also amazing that such an incident could have occurred again after the nation's experience in Chibok 2014, Dapchi 2018? Should such a huge number of students be left unprotected in a boarding school located in a town around which banditry had been pervading? What in the name of good sense has become of proactive intelligence and action in security management and strategies? Consequently, the ADP shares with Nigerians, having been asking some pertinent questions without receiving answers from those that they elected to oversee their security and safety. For instance, for how long shall we live with the horror of Boko Haram? Should Nigerians, in accordance with the wisdom and gospel of the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Boratai, wait for as long as the next 20 years before the war against insurgency is accomplished? If the Boko Haram will live with us for as long as 2 decades from now, what then is the moral justifications of General Boratai and the other service chiefs in their respective duty posts? This throws up another question as to the logic and wisdom in President Buhari's reluctance, better still, recalcitrance, in listening to the clamor and the advice from a broad spectrum of Nigerians of different shades of social status that his war commanders have obviously run out of ideas and too fatigued to deliver on the goals of a critical war, which is the most serious threat to his government. Keen observers have lost count of the huge sums of money in local and foreign currencies, most of which came by way of external loans, expended in the execution of the war against insurgency in the year 2020. Just how much of our national resource and human lives shall we have to lose to win this war? The Sultan of Sokoto, His Eminence Alhaji Saad Abubakar, himself a retired general, recently advised that the military should invade and occupy the entire Sambisa forest. This is precisely the same panacea offered by the then candidate Muhammadu Buhari in 2014. Why has the president since taken the battle? Why has the president since not taken the battles to the enemy's enclaves? Why has the military high command reverted to the strategy of creating super camps instead of following the enemies to the Sambisa forest and other forests like we have in Katsina State and other parts of the country? The way forward, as earlier stated, the Nigerian project is for all of us to salvage. In this spirit, the Action Democratic Party, as a national political party, wishes to register the following as to the policy options and actions that may be considered by the APC federal government in the year 2021. The overriding opinion of Nigerians is that President Muhammadu Buhari and his administration have come short of the standards of leadership expected by Nigerians when they twice voted for him and his party in 2015 and 2019. As a result of his leadership style, a broad spectrum of Nigerians, including those who were his fanatical supporters, have become disillusioned and as they are disappointed and flustered. A sad reason giving rise to the declining rating of the president is the fact that he has not given the impression of a leader that is in charge. In a recent remark, our Nobel laureate, Professor Wole Soyinka, cynically remarked, "As far as I am concerned, there is nobody in charge of the country." From the foregoing, it is imperative that Mr. President, who is in his second and final leg of his tenure, can rewrite history in the remaining years of his term in Aso Rock by being firm, bold, and forthright in taking decisions and providing leadership without fearing the political consequences. To him, history beckons. It is not too late for him to write his name in gold in the annals of our national history. For the academy in 2021, the government should, in respect of the year's budget, consider readjusting the lopsided nature now tilted towards recurrent expenditure against the capital expenditure. The deficit in the budget is too huge to allow for any meaningful development in the coming fiscal year. The resort to a wide-ranging and excessive taxation that will inevitably be resorted to make for the shortfalls will definitely come to mean further pushing the already stressed Nigerians to further economic hardships and agony. Therefore, the government should creatively devise other means and strategies that will not result in further economic emasculation and the escalation of poverty in the land. Number 5, government should look, in a nutshell, gentlemen of the press pray that President Muhammadu Buhari will come out of his shell and give to Nigerians the dynamic, vibrant, and focused leadership for which many expected and still expecting from him as the captain of our ship of nation to guarantee our safety from a shipwreck. On this note, I wish to use this forum to felicitate with all my compatriots a happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year. I wish also to enjoy all Nigerians to live and celebrate the unity peacefully and responsibly and observe all the prescribed personal protection protocols against the spread of COVID-19. We shall overcome, inshallah. May God bless Nigeria. Long live ADP. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you.